Hello there, and welcome along to Season 2 and Episode 9 of the Gardner Ben podcast. Well, to say the season here in the UK has motored on and spring has really arrived is an understatement. Temperatures have continued to soar here in the UK, reaching around 16 to 18 degrees over the last week, meaning that absolutely everything is pushing on nicely out in the garden. Which means this week out in the garden, I've finally got round to bedding out my autumn sown sweet peas. Much later than I actually think I would have done. Normally I sow my sweet peas in the spring, choosing to sow them under glass in January and the very beginning of February. This means I normally don't have to look after them during the autumn and winter months, and I get to put the greenhouse to bed and don't have to worry about it over the festive season. However, this year I thought I'd try something different, and I thought I would try sowing them in October. They're actually no further ahead than they would have been, in my opinion, if I had sown them actually in the beginning of January or February. The autumn and winter here was so very dark and dull, with weeks and weeks and weeks of rain and grey overcast weather. They simply sat in the greenhouse looking particularly miserable, not doing a great deal at all. And it's only really since the temperature started to rise over the last month or so they've actually started to produce any type of growth whatsoever. Anyway, they finally made their way into the ground, and I've given them another feed of Envy Seafeed Extra to give them a little bit of a kick. They'll be offered a Seafeed Extra feed every 2 weeks from now on in, until they actually start to produce their first flowers, probably in the beginning of June or July. Then, as soon as I start picking blooms, I'll be feeding them every time that I pick. Pick, feed, pick, feed. Never miss a feed if you're picking sweet peas, or they will start to go yellow. They're really heavy feeders and will need loads and loads of nutritional value to keep them moving. And if you ever see yellowing growth at the very bottom of your plants, this is a sure sign that you're not keeping up with your feeding schedule. And unfortunately, once this kind of growth starts to set in, it often spreads very quickly up the plant, and they come to an abrupt halt, normally by the end of July or the beginning of August, where if you'd fed them properly and kept up with your feeding schedule, they'll flower all the way into September and sometimes the very beginning of October. Now, I know buying large quantities of feed is never cheap or very particularly easy, so I always make sure that I start hoarding this at the beginning of the year, buying 1 or 2 pots whenever I can afford to, and putting them by literally for a rainy day during the months of June, July, August, September, when I know that I'm going to be going through loads and loads and loads of it. Also, out in the garden, I've been telling everybody on social media to make sure that they're watering all of their pots and newly planted roses well. Now the temperatures have started to rise, if, like me, you've packed thousands of bulbs into bulb lasagnas, especially tulips, daffodils and hyacinths, you need to make sure that you're watering them regularly, even if it rains. Bulbs packed full of foliage often don't get wet at all when it rains, so you need to make sure that you water them regularly and, wherever possible, get a water retaining saucer underneath the pot. Tulips and hyacinths especially that don't receive as much rain as they need or water as they need will often produce really short and dumpy stems and fail to reach their full potential, making them a little bit unsightly and a bit disappointing. So do make sure you get out and water your containers well from the very beginning of April. Also, as soon as you've had any flowers spent on daffodils and tulips, make sure that you remove the flower heads but leave the stems on just as quickly as possible. You don't want the bulbs wasting precious energy producing pointless seeds. So if you make sure that you pick the flower heads off, all of the energy produced by the stems and the leaves will be piled back into the bulbs for next season. Here in the North Lodge Cottage garden, I've also been unwrapping my tree ferns. A little bit ahead of schedule, but the temperatures are consistent and they seem to be waking up already. The winter temperatures over this last winter have been really quite cold, and we've experienced some really heavy frosts, which unfortunately means all of the foliage from last season is blackened off and has had to be removed. I haven't removed their protective collars just yet, and I've kept the top covers handy just in case the temperatures plummet again. But they've been offered their first watering from the water butts and each been given a good handful of well-rotted soil conditioner to make sure they have all the energy they need to grow away strongly over the next couple of weeks and months. I've also been filming some media about how you can maintain and look after olive trees, as many of you have specimens in the garden. I'm obviously lucky enough to have 2 incredibly large ancient olives, which I brought in and built our patio around. but I'll be sharing media about how you can look after olive trees in the garden over the coming weeks on social media. This week's guest is Brad from Select Roses and his adorable poodle Jedi. Brad is a rose hybridiser and owns Select Roses in British Columbia. He's also a very talented gardener and grows thousands of sweet peas and some enormous onions, so I really do hope that you enjoy our conversation. Now, on today's episode of the podcast, we're heading all the way across the Atlantic Sea and we're going to be talking to Brad at Select Roses in British Columbia. Brad, welcome along to the Ben podcast. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Ben. Welcome to Canada.
How are you?
I'm great today.
Wonderful. I understand that at the moment, thank you so much for making the time to speak to me because at the moment you guys are super, super busy. I've been following your progress online. How many roses is it that you've been working on over the last few weeks?
Well, we bring in about 8,000 bare root roses a year. Some years we bring in 10,000, so it's a lot of fun work. We have the same dedicated crew that comes in, and we start potting them up and then getting them out into the nursery, ready for people to come and visit. So it's a big push time of the year, but we love doing it, and I'm sure that's what's going on in the UK right now as well.
Yes, it's a very, very busy time of year all round. So tell us a little bit about Select Roses, what it is that you do, and what it is that you're selling to the public.
Sure. Well, I've been growing roses, everybody in my family, as a gardener, as a hobby. And then I started in my teen years enjoying growing roses as a hobby. And then I opened the rose nursery in 1990. And the idea was to bring in rose bushes that were maybe a little bit different than the other garden centers have. And from the very first year, I was interested in hybridizing, creating my own roses. So those
Hmm.
were the two things that happened 35 years ago. And one thing that we focus on a little bit different here is I've made time to travel to different parts of the world to meet different rose breeders and rose growers. And we've really tried to build up a unique rose culture in Canada and in our part of Canada. And it's worked well. Our customers like it, and we like doing it. And basically, all we do here is specialize in rose bushes. And for the longest time, we were the only people doing it. There's another one now that also specializes in roses.
Okay. So you've been doing it for some time. So are they the roses that you're hybridizing? I'm assuming you're focusing very much on your specific climate, which obviously over where you are is can be brutally cold.
Yeah, well, I'm on the west coast of Canada, so our climate is quite similar here to the UK, maybe a little bit
Okay, yeah,
colder.
yeah,
So we can grow. You're familiar with the Daphne plant? We can grow that in our gardens
yes, yeah.
here. We can grow most rose bushes that survive most years, but we might get winters in my immediate area of maybe minus 17 degrees, which is getting pretty cold for a rose,
Okay, well
with some wind chill on top of that.
oh,
Yeah,
you're
but
chilling me.
not often we get
You're chilling me to the
most.
core just thinking about it.
Oh, is that what is the coldest you get in your
Okay,
immediate
well,
area?
we had about 5 years ago something we called the Beast from the East. That was we had two
Okay,
beasts from the East, and basically it was weather that came across from Russia, came across from Siberia and Russia. It was very dry and
okay,
very
yeah,
cold. That
yeah.
brought temperatures to about -8 to about -12, and basically the UK shut down. We'd never experienced anything like that before.
Okay,
We did
yeah,
lose things catastrophically. I mean, here on the south
mm,
coast, I'm right down south on the south coast of England. Realistically, a
yeah.
cold night for us would be -2, -3. Anything below that, and
Okay.
I won't go outside -5. I'm just not doing it. So yeah, your kind of temperatures for me are harsh.
Oh yeah, we -8. We would think, okay, that's a chilly night, but I wouldn't worry about it. But when we get into the minus
Into the
teen
double figures,
temperatures,
yeah.
I'm familiar with that really cold winter because I'm addicted to watching Gardener's World with Monty Don, and he talked
Yes,
about all the
yeah.
losses that they had during that cold winter there. And we've had a couple more brutal winters, with the climate shifting the last couple of years here. And it's come from a period where we've had winter of, say, +5, +8, even +10, and then a week later, -10.
It's
And that plays havoc with the plants. So the ones that
exactly
I've
the
bred
same
were,
story here. Yeah.
yeah. So we're trying to breed really healthy roses because nobody sprays here. We can't buy pesticides here anymore,
Yeah.
and everybody wants to be do a much better job looking after the natural insects and predators in our gardens. So we really try to breed healthy type of roses that are a little more winter hardy. So the breeding program has a lot of, we use Harkness roses in our breeding program, but a
Hmm.
lot of Cortez roses as
Okay.
well. We
So
find that really helps
you're
improve.
focusing very much on the health and vigor to make sure
Yeah.
they're strong enough to rebuff, and then obviously there are the characteristics, the color, the form, and the fragrance are not secondary, but
Yeah.
they're coming as bonus points after you can get a
Yeah.
rose that's
Yeah.
particularly wonderful. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been watching
Absolutely.
you. I've been watching you guys pot up as well. I mean, you're using enormously large pots as well. What size pot are you actually putting them into?
So that we would call it a 3-gallon pot here.
Yeah.
Some people sell even in 5 gallons. Everything is bigger in North America. People want bigger. So even the plants you'll see, the rose bushes are larger. When I
They
see
are. I
what
mean,
they sell
there's some
in England, I was
exceptional
like, oh
quality
wow.
plants. Yeah.
Yeah, so we brought some roses from England and Europe before, and when we put them in the pots here, our customers look at them and they just think, "Oh, will it grow?" And we have to convince them that this is actually the norm. This is very good, and yes, it will grow, but in comparison, they look much smaller. But there's
So,
also a different rootstock they bud on here, so it
yeah.
gives the plant a bigger push that first year.
Uh-huh.
Multiflora is the understock that's often used
Okay,
here.
all right. And just out of interest, the plants that, for instance, I've been seeing you guys pot up over the last couple of weeks on your Instagram and your videos and
Yep.
things. How old are those plants when you're actually getting them? Because obviously, I'm known for being a David Austin rose expert. I know that the
Yep.
roses that are
Okay.
coming out of
Yep.
David Austin are between 24 months and 36 months old. That's the size they're supplied here in the UK.
Same as yours. Exactly the same. They've
Really?
budded them the one summer in the field. The
Yeah.
next summer the plant grows and it's harvested that fall. So
Wow.
it's
Okay.
the same age. It's incredible to go and see them
You
in
must
the
be feeding
field.
them Gatorade and Canadian maple syrup or something to get them that big. They're
Well, yeah,
huge.
they get a lot of good food as well. And you see so the mix we use is a mixture of core with there's a lot of bark here, so there's bark and perlite in that.
Yeah,
A lot less peat is being used now,
yeah,
significantly less than in past years. I'm sure that's the same over there.
very much so. Yeah, I was actually
And
talking about that on a live stream today when I was potting up some dahlias, and obviously, as you're aware, that the lack of, I mean, peat obviously was a terrible. I mean, to remove peat from the ground, it releases a massive amount of carbon, and
yes,
it takes a huge amount of carbon footprint to actually add any nutritional value to it, because obviously peat is completely null and void of any nutritional value. It's millions of years old.
exactly. Yeah.
However, it did hold water really well, and you could make sure the plot,
Hmm.
that the compost was evenly watered. With modern compost, now
Hmm.
it's very, very difficult to get a decent amount of water in it. You often find with a completely organic based compost, which is made from a ground organic matter, that the top will be dry, and you'll think it needs water, and then you're throwing a lot of water onto a plant that just sits very unhappily in sort of very soggy soil. So I'm assuming adding things like the bark and the perlite to that really opens the mix up and redistributes the water to it.
Yeah, it does. It drains freely right through, and we get a lot of rain here, so we need a mix that does that. And we use this mix for years, but the cocoa fiber, the cores have become really popular in the
Hmm.
last 10 years here.
Yeah.
And I think that's what most of the growers are going for that. And we will sell a lot of these rose bushes. People will come in as soon as we open and buy them, so they haven't even leafed out. So when they bring it out of the pot, it's basically bare root
A
again, and
bare
we
root rose. Yeah.
quickly
Yeah.
mix that into the garden. Other people want to wait and see them in bloom, which is fine. So they'll fully root out in that pot. Then you'll come later in the season to see us. And they have to be a little more careful, of course, when they transplant it. You hold the root ball together. And imagine that must be the same there. You have the early people that go out to get the roses that are fresh there that haven't leafed out, and then again later in bloom.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, for instance, I mean, I don't know the process, for instance, at Harkness or at Peter Beals, but definitely I know the process very well from David Austin. That basically the roses are lifted in very late October and put into cold storage, and they're kept temperature controlled and humidity controlled in large fridges, and then over the obviously the winter months they sell them bare root, and if you're lucky enough to buy them bare root, you
Yeah.
can get hold of them nice and cheap without the pot, and then they
Hmm.
start potting up. And I'm always suggesting to people that the biggest trauma point is that point you were just describing, when people the rose has leafed out and it hasn't quite rooted through the pot. As a horticulturalist,
100%.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh, I hate that point, and I worry every rose
it
we
makes me
sell like
feel,
that.
yeah,
I try and tell people, like,
just
if you
you're better off
can hold
sinking the
it
pot in
another
the
few
ground.
weeks.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, yeah. It is traumatizing to the
yeah, yeah.
plants, traumatizing to me because I love plants so much.
Yeah. And of course, the
Yeah,
first thing they often do is I get sent a picture on either Instagram or YouTube or TikTok, and it's
yeah.
like, oh, the plant has gone all limp. And you said, okay, what happened
Mhm.
to it while you potted it? So, well, we went outside, and of course, a bright spring day is normally, I don't know, 16, 17, 18
Yes.
degrees.
Uh-huh.
And they were out there
Yeah.
at sort of 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The root ball fell away, so they shoved it in a
Yeah.
pot in the ground,
And that's
and
what
now
happened. Yeah.
it's all gone limp. And I had someone send me pictures of a standard rose. They'd bought a pair of standard roses from David Austin, obviously very
Oh, and that's
expensive,
costly.
and yeah,
Yes.
and one beautiful, and the other one just sort of this looked like it had lettuce leaf that had been out in the sun for hours on end. It was just, and it's like, oh God, okay, we put it into the shade, make sure you water it well, cover it up with something like an old net curtain,
Hmm.
give it some
Hmm.
shade or an umbrella. But yeah, it's one of those things. I often tell people, if you're picking up roses once they've been potted, to keep them in their pots to probably, here in the UK, probably till the end of May. It's probably
Yep.
safe enough for them to root out
Same
through their
same
pots.
time, yeah.
Yeah,
Same time, yeah.
and then you're
If
fairly
you
safe.
pick them up really early when we first open, then it's fine. The rose doesn't know it's been able to actually take up a little bit of that moisture,
Yeah.
and that if you pull them out right away, put them in, the weather's still cool. But as soon as they're halfway rooted out and we're getting into temperatures of 15 to 20 degrees, boy, that's sure tough on the plants, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah. It's trying to grow with all the starches and sugars from last year, but no root system to actually suck up any moisture, isn't it? So
Yeah,
it's
and then people want to help it by fertilizing it too, and that, well,
yeah, they want to pile, they want to start piling on the feed months before. And I'm saying to people, no, just calm down. Again, there was another episode of the podcast that
yeah.
came out a couple of weeks ago about, again, just because you want to feed it, piling on feed doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get more
Hmm.
flowers. It will just mean the plant will become weak and it won't
Yeah,
be able to hold the stem. So
yeah. Yeah.
talk us through about you brought it up. So what are you feeding your roses over there? What's your go-to feed of
So
choice?
we have a custom blend here, and our blend basically is similar to what I've heard you recommend there. So a reasonable amount of nitrogen, a little
Hmm.
bit lower the middle number, and then higher again with potassium, and then we
Yeah.
have full trace elements. The nitrogen form is a slower release in ours. So we
Okay.
know our soils here are very depleted in nitrogen, so that's why we give an ample dose of nitrogen
Is
earlier
it,
in the
may I
season.
ask, is that generally because of the huge amount of rain and snowfall that you get?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
just
huge
through,
amount of rain.
yeah,
Yeah,
washing that through the soil.
yeah, and so we have a slow release we put in the pots that we're selling, and then we tell people don't feed right away because everything is there to help it start, and then after that they can use our food. But I'm a big proponent of using both liquid sea kelp, fish fertilizer. I think is
Hmm.
great to use any
Yeah.
of those. And you won't do any damage usually with those. I always tell people you can kill a rose so easily by overfeeding it. You're not going to kill it by underfeeding it. So
No,
err
no,
on the
quite.
side of caution
Yeah.
if you're not an experienced gardener. And I'm an experienced gardener, and I've even killed plants from overfeeding because it's
Got
pretty easy
over.
to do when you. Yeah.
Yeah, I often tell people that, again, that the point that I'm obviously not such an issue with you guys with the amount of rainfall that you're getting, but over here in the UK with climate change over the last 5 to 10 years, we've
Hmm.
noticed that our summers, we are regularly not getting rainfall for somewhere in the region of about 3 to 6 weeks during the summer now, which
Yep.
doesn't sound
That's
particularly,
the same cycle that's
which can
happening
be
with us. Yeah.
quite brutal when your plants aren't
Hmm.
used to it. And I say to people, focused and deep watering, and they say, well, what does that mean? It means, for me, it means 2 or 3 gallons of water at a time around the root zone
Yep.
of the plant, once or twice a week. Get that water
Yeah.
right down into the subsoil and make the plant look for it.
Yeah.
Get the plant to drive its roots into the soil and actually find and look for that water. And after several years of doing that, you won't need to water it because it will be naturally. If, of course, the problem you get is people love to go out and sort of tinker a little bit, and they give it, I don't know, 2 or 3 liters at a time, quarter of a gallon, and you think, well, all you're doing is intravenously drip feeding it. You'll keep its roots to the
Yeah.
surface. They want to
Yeah.
drive the roots down
Yeah.
and look for the water and the nutritional value themselves.
Yeah. You want to get the plants sloshed. And we've had a couple
It's a
years
good
ago,
one.
I think We went 9 weeks without any measurable precipitation a
Yeah.
couple years ago. So
Was
we
that
often are
maybe
getting stretches three.
2022 maybe,
Yep,
or
yep.
2023?
That's the
Yeah.
big heat. That
Yeah.
heat dome. Oh man, that was tough on them. So when you do water well,
Yeah,
lots of it,
I was
and
coming
then
home,
let
coming
them.
because I'm a full-time gardener and then obviously garden at home and create content at home. But I was coming home and sort of locking myself in a dark room. It was just, it sounds like a lovely thing to do, but it was brutal working in sort of 33, 34, 35 degrees. I mean, it's just, we're
Yeah.
just not used, I simply just not used to that kind of heat.
Yeah. Well, when that hit, I know exactly where I was. I was visiting another city here, our capital city, Victoria. I went to tour gardens, and I was texting with my staff, and they were telling me how brutal it was. And they say, "How are you managing?" I said, "Well, staff, I hate to tell you, I'm sipping a beer in an air-conditioned, cold, luxurious hotel room, but close the nursery
Okay.
early, and everybody go home,
Yeah.
show up early." But it was that brutal. We actually had to close the nursery, and
Really?
we didn't want to encourage people to be out there. And I saw plants that looked like a blowtorch, rhododendrons and broadleaves. It looked like a blowtorch had been
Just,
sprayed over
yeah,
them. It
to
just
literally
burnt the
scorch
leaves.
them. Yeah. Yeah. It
Yeah.
was a really good year. Sorry?
How high was the temperature? We were over 40 degrees.
Oh, we knocked on the door of 40. I think we hit
Yeah.
38. And obviously
Yeah.
I took to my social media platforms to talk about it. And
Yeah.
many Americans, especially from sort of
Yeah.
down south Texas, said, "Oh, that's not hot." And it's like, it might not be hot for
Yeah.
you guys, but that's for
Yeah.
us. This is not normal for us. Our roads are melting and things are buckling. And
Yes. Yeah.
it was a good
Yeah.
year
Yeah.
for
We're
me
not used to it.
for review wise, because obviously I have reviewed now 135 roses, racking up over
Yep.
3 million views on YouTube. That actually enabled me to
Amazing.
create some content about disease resistance and the roses. That it was a really
Yeah.
good year for me to read. For instance, I brought everybody a heat tolerant collection of roses that are
Okay.
really
Good.
standard, because a lot of our English roses, they're not bred for that kind of temperature. And it was really interesting
Yeah,
to see
that's
that
right. Yeah.
some of them, actually, a lot of my followers are obviously down in Arizona, they're in Texas. I mean, they're in hotter places.
Hmm.
They join me from India, all sorts of weird and wonderful places worldwide, which is wonderful.
Hmm.
But when it comes to temperature, obviously we're so temperate here that it was a really good opportunity for me to say, actually, these roses are taking full sun really well. This one's doing really well. This one needs a bit of shade because this one's frying. So again, it was
Yeah.
really interesting a point in the year and in the weather for me to sort of bring content to most people that I wouldn't normally be able to film.
And you know that the colors and the size of the bloom changes dramatically
Very
when you
much
get
so.
that
Yes.
hot as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I tend to prefer them when temperatures are cooler, but some of them I was like, "Oh, you're looking beautiful in the heat." So you've surprised me that you're able to do that. I like watching your rose reviews, and I was thinking of I'm planting a new bed up front of some shrubs. I'm going to put in an old favorite David Austin called Jude the Obscure. I love that
Yes.
one.
Yeah.
Putting that in, and I need a deep color. I want to put a pop color beside it, and I saw your review of James L. Austin, so I
Okay.
think that's
Yes.
who
Yeah.
I'll going to put that in the bed,
Well, I'd
and
be a
hope.
I'd be a bit scared about how big James L. Austin is going to get for you. I mean, it's a substantial sized plant here in the UK. So grown on that.
Oh, good, we got room.
So yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, he gets to about sort of 5 feet by 5 feet here, and I say a really lovely
Oh,
shelf-like plant.
oh,
It's as
oh.
basically
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
as wide here as it is tall. So you get this
Okay.
sort of shelf look where very much like uh my brain's gone dead for a second. I'll catch up with my tongue in a moment. Charles Darwin does, get very
Okay.
flat
Yeah.
on the top and lots of blooms held skyward. So yeah, that one will bleach out. I'm not sure if you can get it over there, but also take a look at Sophie's Rose, which is one from the
Oh, yeah. I've
late
seen it here
90s.
before. Yeah.
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
review that one last year, and obviously there's a very lack of dark coloured Austins in the country at the moment, for
There
varying
is
reasons.
Munstead Wood.
They've been
I still have one of his early ones, William Shakespeare 2000. I have
yes,
three of
yeah,
them,
again
and it is
discontinued here now.
spectacular. Yeah, it's been discontinued. It gets a lot of disease, but when it's on, is it on? Oh,
Yeah,
I'm going to send you some of the photos I took of it the last few
you
years.
torment me with them.
Just love that thing when it's at its best. Yeah,
But the
glorious.
problem I'm having is that obviously in Canada and America especially, and other parts of Europe, that lots of the David Austin roses from the 80s, 90s, and early noughties are still very much available and grown over there. And here in the
Yeah.
UK, they've been retired and discontinued. So I have a hunger for
Okay.
particular
Yeah.
varieties. I mean, you were tormenting me the other day with some Evelyn's. Um,
Oh yeah.
which we can't
Oh
get here anymore either. And I've literally scoured the length and breadth of the country trying to
yeah.
find them. But I'd love to bring
And
people a review of that particular rose. So, out of the 10,000 roses you're bringing in every year, how many varieties are that you're stocking, Brad?
oh, I think a few hundred. Gee, I
Hmm.
never count. I'm guessing a few hundred, but always there's the top 10, the best seller. So the number one Evelyn this year, because we haven't been able to get it, ours
Yeah.
were U.S. grown, so that's where they came from.
Okay.
Huge plants. We would have sold even more if we had access to the plants. We couldn't
So,
get enough.
you've already sold
Shando's
out of
Beauty.
you've already sold out of those.
Well, there's a few left.
Okay,
I
goodness
always say
me.
there's a few left. Got to
Yeah.
keep people running in the first week we're open. And Shando's Beauty, always
Yes.
a top seller.
Yeah.
Love that rose. And I was one of the first people to have that rose in Canada that I imported from the UK, and I always loved it. And it can get big here.
And
For
have you used that one for hybridizing? Have you
I sure
crossed that with
have.
any? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I use it as a pollen parent. It doesn't seem to set seed well for me, but I use it as a pollen parent, and I'll
Okay.
keep
Yeah.
playing with that one
Hmm.
again. And I love another. One of my favorite roses is an old Harkness rose. Maybe you know it, called Rosemary Harkness. It's
Yes, I
one
do.
of the
Yes.
most
Yeah, I know that
beautiful
one. Yeah.
roses I've ever grown. It's the citrus fragrance I go
Hmm.
for on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lovely. Right. Absolutely amazing. So yeah. So about 200 varieties you say you're stocking.
No, closer to 300.
Throughout coastal
Closer
zone.
to
So
300,
yeah,
I think.
it's funny. I was out in the
Yeah.
garden today. We've been working on an area out in the garden today, and planting the roses that I actually reviewed last year. They've left my trial beds, and they're now making their way into my
Hmm.
permanent collection. And my husband said to me, he said, how many roses you got now?" And it's like, I get a bit cagey, and he said, "Come on, how many are there?" It's like, about 300 of them, and that's 300
Yeah,
varieties in a domestic sized
who
garden. So it's
counts? It's like going to a pub with a good friend. How many drinks have you had? We're not driving. Who's counting? So you do the same thing with the roses.
yeah,
What
yeah.
is your favorite rose? I'm curious. Do you have,
Well,
or do you not want to say?
Well, no, no, it's fine. I mean, my favourite does. I mean, it changes because obviously every year I'm put under. Well, I'm
Me
not.
too.
I'm put under pressure to rework them as new varieties come through. And obviously, I have. It
Yep.
started with a top 10, and then the top 10 wasn't big enough. I couldn't actually narrow it down to 10 like you did with
Okay.
your top
Yep.
bestsellers. It ended up, I think, at
Yep.
about 13 or 14. So I've rested on a top 20, and I recreate the
Yep.
top 20 every single year. And it does change because
Oh,
obviously
good. Yeah.
people are now sending me new varieties, and what I do is, like, I mean, I know they go
Yeah.
through their trials with all of their breeders before they get to me. I know they're out in the field and take, I mean, for instance, David Austin
Yeah.
take 11 or 12 years to produce a variety. However, I
Hmm.
put them through my own trials here in the garden before I actually do a review.
Yeah.
That takes me a full
Yeah.
12 months to do. And then they enter into the review system, and then they might end up in the top 20 from that. Currently, it is Bring Me Sunshine from David Austin Roses. That's ranked top number one for 2 years in a row. It
Yeah.
is exceptional.
I
It's now been
I saw
reclassified.
I saw it last year, and I was not able to keep a plant. The few we were able to get sold right away,
Really?
and the last one I had set aside, and I was going to keep it, and it disappeared.
Oh no.
So I
Well, you'll have
yeah,
to make sure
somebody was very keen.
you have to make sure that you lay your hands back on that one again. It's been reclassified here in the UK. Was brought in as a, again. This is what's interesting about this process is obviously I had it for a year before I mentioned it and before I actually did any review on it. And I said after the first 6 months that I knew that this rose had the potential to get big, and it was getting bigger than David Austin was saying. They said it was going to
Yeah,
get to
they all
about four.
his all do. Yeah, they
Yeah, they
get
was
big
going to
here.
get to about 4 feet, and this was sort of reaching up to about six, and which I thought was a lovely problem. And I started tying it in as a climber, for instance, up a postal pillar, and it got to about eight
Yeah.
feet, and now it's been reclassified as a climber. Very much like the story
Oh,
with
okay.
Claire
So
Austin.
yeah, so it is a real big one then.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, that's
And
good to
it's a
know.
lovely
Yeah.
one as well. I mean, full of a very, very warm, sandalwoody, oaky, woody, spicy fragrance. I hate to say it, but
Yeah.
quite masculine, as you would normally describe a fragrance to be quite
Yeah.
masculine, very warm,
Yeah.
very much like Benjamin Britten, if you're familiar with that one from
Yes.
David
Yeah,
Austin.
familiar with
Really,
that.
really
Yeah.
warm and full of sandalwood and oak and those lovely tones. But
And the
it's,
color for an Austin is very unusual too. Of Bring Me Sunshine.
yes, very bold. Yeah,
Y-
yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
nice to be away from the pinks for just a couple of minutes. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
currently bringing the
And well, I was going to say, do you find I find as I'm aging now, because I turned 60 year, my taste is also changing. So my favorite plants have changed as well.
Okay.
And what I'm looking for sometimes changes. And some of my most favorite ones might even be one that gets a bit of disease, so it might not be a rose I necessarily recommend for the average gardener, but I'm willing to fuss with it, and I
Yeah,
like there's something that attracts me, so it stays with
something
me.
something just ignites the senses and really sort of fills you with joy when you see it. Yeah, see,
Yeah,
this year, last year, 2024, obviously, you guys, you've just mentioned that you were planting Jude the Obscure in a border at the nursery there. Now, obviously, Jude the
yeah,
Obscure from David Austin was retired here in the UK, mostly across
yeah,
Europe. It pretty
yeah.
much to be replaced by Donahue, which is
Okay.
the new version of that. Basically, it's very similar to Jude the
Oh, good.
Obscure, but in difference, it has the ability to get much larger. Here in the UK, Jude is very much 3 feet by 3 feet, and you're lucky if
Okay.
Jude would produce maybe a dozen flowers per flush. Donahue, on the other
Okay.
side, will flower from beginning of May all the way through to Christmas and produce
Oh,
hundreds and hundreds of blooms, wave after probably 5 or 6 waves of flower, and will
oh,
flower
that's
in
great.
deep shade where it only gets 4 or 5 hours of sunlight per day. And it's a whomping great
Wow.
big thing. So look out for that one when it
And
makes it to you.
oh, sign me up. And is it fragrant like Jude? That's what I like about Jude was the
It is
scent.
fragrant, and it has that lovely open chalice shape to the flower,
Yeah, I
that
like
lovely
that. Okay.
iridescent sheen sort of a very soft apricot peach with that lovely sheen and light
Okay.
that expels from it. So yeah, it's a really, really
Oh,
good one. That
beautiful.
one
I'll be
made
looking for that. Yeah.
that one made it to my number two spot, and it was a really difficult toss up between Donahue and Bring Me Sunshine. But as you mentioned a
Mm-hmm.
second ago, it came down to the emotion that Bring Me Sunshine actually brings up in me. It's got so much romance and so much opulence and so much fragrance that
Mm-hmm.
you can almost sort of lose yourself in the flower. It's just so that's the difference between the
Some
two.
of them they just grab you. You look at them, and I think is everybody else noticing this? It is so beautiful. You have to see it. And sometimes I'll be standing at the nursery, but going over a rose like that, and thinking, why is everybody walking by and not just appreciating how gorgeous this rose is? But I guess
Now
we
I'm gonna say
maybe
something controversial now. I don't understand the obsession with double delight.
Double Delight, it's the fragrance, I
Okay,
think.
yeah.
I like Double Delight. And I always make a spot for it. It's the scent that I like. The
Hmm.
plant is atrocious. It has atrocious foliage. It's tender. It just behaves atrociously. But yeah, I'm seduced by the fragrance. And my mama likes it. So, what mama likes, she's turning 87 today. I make sure I have a
I,
rose
I
for her.
I
But,
did see on
it is.
your Instagram today. Do wish a happy birthday from me.
Yeah, thank you. It's one of the top selling roses in North America, has been for years, that rose,
Really?
Double Delight. Yeah,
Okay.
people are obsessed by it. But we're a lot more limited here in what we can get compared to the EU and the UK. It's so much more limited, dominated by just, there's basically one large company left in Canada that buds roses, who I send mine to. And there's three big players in the US, and that's it. So, it really limits you. Now they do have another bigger player that does a lot of own root roses, so there's a lot of different varieties available that way. And I believe they have some of Peter Beale's roses and some of the Harkness roses, which is
Yeah.
great. But it's a lot more difficult for us, especially to get new Austins. It can take a long time to get them here. And then what was coming out of Europe was having trouble making the shipments, and the plants are drying out, so it was a lot difficult that way. So I'm hoping in the future we'll be able to get some of those new ones that you talk about, because I look at many of them in your reviews and think, oh, I would love to have it, but hopefully I'll live long enough to get that one.
Oh, of course you will. Of course you will.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned because you just mentioned Peter Bills are 1 or 2 varieties that you could get over
Hmm.
there. One for you
Yep.
again, one for you to look out from, and what I've suggested this one to a gentleman who was joining me on the podcast of season one, Jeff, the Rose Dude over in Washington.
Oh, yes. Yep.
He was looking for a particularly nice deep coloured sort of cerise dark pink rose to hybridize, and I suggest he
Okay.
keeps his eyes out for one called Ivor's Rose from Peter Beals.
Oh, I've heard of that one, and I
Yeah.
think it's available from the one
Oh,
company I
okay.
deal with in
Yeah.
the U.S., Ivers. I'm going to look for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd
Ivers
very
Rose,
strongly.
and I saw uh, you reviewed another one too of his that had that very carnation like frilly bloom, a goldish colored one.
Oh, you commented under it. Yes, that was
marigold type.
that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually that's a rose from Horner. That one is actually bred
Oh,
by Horner,
Horner.
but
Okay. Yeah.
supplied, yeah, but supplied through Peterbilt's here in the UK. That one was
Okay.
Leah
Yeah.
Tutu.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
big
that's nice.
big golden
Peter
one with.
Beals, the gentleman himself, the founder, he
Mhm.
had been to my nursery many years
Oh,
ago.
wonderful. Yeah.
Lovely man. Enjoyed him a lot. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you should mention Leah Tutu actually, because that particular rose was one of the reasons why I started my review process. That actually, no disrespect to to Peterbilt's whatsoever, these things happen everywhere. But the pictures in the catalogue and online of that particular rose made it look murky and muddy and really very
Oh,
uninspiring.
okay. Yeah.
However, that rose is unbelievably interesting in its character and its form. Hundreds of petals, all sort of chrysanthemum shaped, spoon-like and long, and this wonderful sort of domed rosette on the top, and a really, really vivid, powerful gold color. Just utterly enchanting when you see it in the flesh, and you think, well, goodness me, someone please go out and take a decent picture of that. You're doing it a terrible injustice on the website. It just looks awful.
Oh, did you send them your review of that? Maybe they because
Yes,
they
I
want to
did. Yeah,
sell
yeah.
more of the rose. It was a great review, but that does happen, and it did look so unusual when I saw that. I sent it off to a couple rose friends of mine,
Yeah.
and they were like, "What is that?" I said, "Well, that's just a rose."
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm curious what the breeding was on it because its name, the last name in it is Tutu, so you know the Cordes rose, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. It can open with very unusual form, and we
Uh-huh.
used it in breeding a lot, and it gave me flowers that had these very unusual shapes to them.
Okay, well, the
So,
Leah Tutu was actually named after his wife. So
hmm,
I don't know the heritage behind the actual rose, but I know it was bred by Horner, available from
okay, yeah,
Peterbilt's here in the UK. And it's just doubling back to, just so you know as well, if you do manage to lay your hands on Ivor's rose, it produces
yep.
really good hips. So
Oh, okay.
if
I'm
you
I'm
need a
making a
hip,
big note of that
yeah,
one.
if you need a
Yep.
hip setter, and I do know they actually stratify and they actually germinate quite well. I'm not going to tell
Oh,
you why
okay.
I know that, but I do know that. But yeah,
Good.
it does
Okay.
produce really nice, big, plump, beautifully red hips that overwinter nicely, and they do stratify and they actually germinate well. So yeah, it
Oh,
might be a good parent for you to work from.
well, that is a great tip. I wrote a note of that. I'm going to try and get that rose for
I
sure.
feel
And
one called the Gardner Ben coming on. It's
yes, yeah, that would be a great name for a rose now, wouldn't it? Yeah. Do you have a favorite color class, or do you like? I like them all. I just like the rose that attracts me, and it can be from many petaled roses to single roses. I think even a rose like Dainty Bess, Mrs. Oakley Fisher, those singles, I love them as well.
yeah, yeah, me too. With especially with things like Tottering by Gently and Kew Gardens here and
Oh,
Open
that's
Arms.
they're beautiful,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the volume of bloom you see on those,
Yeah,
incredible volume.
sometimes I think the way they move as well, just a little bit of breeze in the sun, and they
Yes,
dance about
yeah,
like little fairies. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
for
and
me, normally my color palette tends to be quite. I mean, I am quite pink and quite soft in its tones and hues. But for instance, I planted one today called RNLI from Peter Beals, which was new from them last year. And that's a very,
okay,
very
yeah,
powerful sort of yellow with a sort of lovely russety yellow edge to it. So again, I do like to mix it up, and my borders here at North Lodge are they're just a kaleidoscope of everything. I don't tend to color theme anything. I just take the labels off it and chuck it in the ground. And if it jars, well, sometimes it's a lovely way of just sort of showcasing different colors together. But yeah, it's for
hmm
me, it's very much
yeah.
it's very much a passion and how and sort of the emotions it stirs in me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And with you were mentioning with the single roses, the color they do dance in the air. There's a little bit of a breeze, but also when the light levels are changing, you pick up all the different hues through the bush, and it's the volume of bloom they make when you
Yes,
have
yeah,
the more simple roses that I
yeah.
love.
I'll be
Wonderful.
reviewing one this year, and I'm now saying I can't remember quite what it's called. I'll have to come back to it, but there is one used over here in amenity and sort of amenity planting for sort of council properties and around industrial estates. Now,
Okay.
what is that
Yes.
one called? Little tiny
Landscape
rose.
type of
Anyway,
roses.
I'll have to have a look at my notes. There's no point in me mentioning it now because I've forgotten. But yeah, there is one that I'm going to be reviewing this year that is just most people would associate through sort of car parks around sort of retail parks. They've seen it, and again, it flowered. I monitored it last year, and it flowered for 18 weeks solid. And you think that's astonishing. I mean, this.
Yep.
If it can do
That's
that in a car
amazing.
park with no water
Oh,
and people treading all over it, imagine what you could do in your garden.
yeah. I call it, that's a plant that pays its rent.
Indeed,
Yeah,
very
that's
much so, yes.
wonderful. So where is your garden? I'm trying to picture. I know a little bit of the landscape there.
Okay, well, if
So
you imagine the UK, right down at the bottom of the UK is the Isle of Wight,
yeah.
and inland from the Isle of Wight and the little pointy bit right in the middle is the New Forest, and we're literally just on the outskirts of the New Forest, so right in the middle,
Oh,
right at the
okay.
very bottom on the south coast.
Yeah. So generally, you would be in even for quite a mild area there. So I imagine when you did have -8, that would have been something for you.
Very
Okay,
much
that's
so,
quite.
yes. I mean, it
Yeah.
killed things dead in the garden, whole trees. I
Yeah.
mean, it literally, again, as you were mentioning, it wasn't just the fact it was -8, it was the fact it was +8 or +10 the day before, and everything was very sort of
Yeah. The
mild,
sap is flowing. Yes. Yeah.
and then literally we were plunged into I mean, very, very brutal sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough on the gardens, good for the nursery business that spring if they can get the plants, but a lot of them suffer tremendous losses too because we had lost a huge amount that year.
Yeah,
Was the biggest plant loss I had ever noticed here in landscapes was from that year.
really,
And it was that swing in temperatures that did it. Even giant, well-established rhododendrons had lost all their leaves, and most of them leafed back out again, but a few of them I had in my garden, the plant was just died. The bark split and the plant was dead.
yeah,
This
because
plant
literally
had been thriving for
yeah,
25 years.
the
So,
sap was still very much up and sort of expanded underneath the bark, and that's it gone.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Goodness me,
Things had re-
that's quite a testament for when you've been open 35 years and you say that particular year was the most brutal you experienced.
yeah, yeah,
Somebody
by far.
commented
And
on somebody commented on my YouTube channel a couple of days ago that climate change was made up, and for me to grow up, and it's oh my God,
uh,
I can't deal with the Earth is flat people right now. The Earth is on
no,
fire.
no.
Please stop.
Ask a gardener. Anybody that's a gardener watches what's happening,
Yes,
and
yeah,
we can notice the difference. And I would say I've noticed, especially in the last 10-year cycle, there's a lot more of these. It seems like the weather patterns here just get stuck. Boy, the rain comes, and does it come for a while? And then the heat comes, and it's there for a while. Same
yeah,
as when we just had a big dump of snow, so we delayed our potting here. And we went from mild to a huge dump of snow and brutally cold. Um, I think the wind was blowing in about -10 one night. That was a week before we were potting roses. So we
really.
okay, we held that off, and then all of a sudden the temperatures warmed up and it changed. And I'm like, how did that just happen? Well, welcome to climate change. It just
Yeah,
happened. Yeah.
yeah, quite. And I'd love to know your eagles. Are your eagles still with you, or have they moved on?
Oh, they've moved on. So I've noticed every year we start potting around mid-February. They come to those two huge, large fir trees there.
Yeah,
And I don't know if they're just getting to know each other again or what's going on. And they're pretty vocal. But I do see them though in the area, but just not in those trees. So you'll still see them flying around through the rest of the season, but they get very vocal in watching from those two trees around the middle of February every year. So I've
must
recorded
be
them a few times.
must be an extraordinary sight to see.
Oh, it's something when they spread their wings there. It's incredible. Yeah, it really gets Jedi going.
I'm
Gets
just going to
excited
say,
about that.
what does for those listening who doesn't know, Jedi is he a poodle or is he a labradoodle?
He's a standard poodle, so a
He's
full size regular poodle.
he's a beautiful, and in this country we would call him his color would be called Phantom. He's grey and charcoal, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful color. He's the best dog I've ever had. Loves the farm, loves being outside. But when it's birds of prey, he seems to chase. Like looks in the sky and he chases and barks at them. He wants them out of his airspace. He does not mind the small songbirds, but when it's those large birds, he's all about barking at them. And he can see them at quite the distance, hundreds of feet away.
Really?
Yeah,
He's a,
and you know what? He's a complete gentleman in the garden. I take a lot of videos where he's found a little spot of earth that he can sit and watch me from. He doesn't dig up the plants. He won't squash anything. He's a perfect garden dog.
I've noticed
But he
from
has,
your videos, you could say often he likes to pose, so he will sit in the middle of a border and allow you to record him and sit there all
oh yeah,
regal
yeah.
looking. Yeah,
Oh, when I bring the iPhone out and I say, Jedi, would you like your picture? His ears perk up and he will sit there for it. And it's like he knows I'm photographing him. And
No.
when I put a video or photo of him, it gets far more hits than a picture of a flower. Certainly more hits than a picture of me. But he gets the most comments, the most hits. So,
Well, that's
yeah.
really interesting because I don't know if you're aware, but I have a Labradoodle. We have a Labradoodle called Ethel. So she's part
Ethel.
Labrador,
Oh, I
part.
haven't seen her then, so I'll have
Oh,
to study
she's
the.
got she's a golden color. We'd call her apricot. So she's
Okay, beautiful.
a mixed breed. So she's actually 25%
Yeah.
Labrador and 75% poodle. And she's completely the
Okay.
opposite to Jedi. If you take out your phone to take a video or take a picture of her, she will look the other way as if she's very snooty and she's sort of, I don't know if you've ever heard of the spelling of the farts acting, where you're sort of putting your nose up in the air and turning yourself away. She'll turn her head
Oh,
away and she will not look at the phone until you give her a treat. I mean,
really?
she's a little bugger with it, yeah.
Oh, she's
As if you're
smart, so
stealing
she knows
part of
to
her
get the
soul
treat
with the
that way.
camera.
Oh, fantastic! Isn't it funny? They're such care. And is she good in the garden? Because I've always had dogs, and mine have always been great in the garden. But I know people tell me they get dogs, and the dogs do a lot of destruction. But no, mine is
She
good.
has been, she's now 10. She was 10 a couple of weeks ago. She has been an absolute joy, 100% joy. She is, I think it's all the poodle parts of her. She wants to please. She
Yeah,
wants to be with us all the time. She
yeah,
doesn't care where we go or what we do. She just wants to be
yeah.
close. And she won't set foot on soil. So she'll access the
Oh,
lawn, the driveway, the patio.
yeah.
If we're playing ball and her ball goes into a border, she will basically sit at the edge of the lawn and whine at it and won't set foot in the border. She's an absolute dream. No, always has
Hmm.
been.
Hey, so you mentioned lawn there. I'm interested. What is the movement in the UK? People here are becoming much more natural. Some people taking up their lawns or leaving them a little bit larger now, more
Hmm.
wildflowers in them. Is
Yeah.
the clipped groomed lawn still popular?
Yes and no. There is a movement towards a more natural lawn and not
Yeah,
actually just making sure it's exclusively grass and allowing
yeah.
sort of daisies and buttercup and clover to creep into it. So it
Okay,
doesn't have
yeah.
to be an immaculate lawn. There was a huge movement here about 10, 12 years ago about no mow May, which I don't particularly agree with. For
Yeah.
varying reasons, and that was basically to encourage people to encourage wildlife into their garden by leaving their lawns uncut all the way through the month of May. Now, wonderful
Mm,
idea, but that's like offering
yeah.
someone somewhere to live and then snatching it away after 28 days and say you can no longer have that. And if I,
Yeah.
and my advice to people is if they're going to do no mow May, actually to take an area of their garden where they don't necessarily need to cut the lawn. For instance, they don't have children or pets that need access to it. We have an
Yeah.
area here in the garden which is about 150 square meters, which I don't touch. I trim it down once a year, and basically that's the kind of thing I'm suggesting people do. And actually, just set aside an area in the garden. Hopefully, if you can, 10-15% of your total plot size, which is about what I've done
Hmm.
here, and just leave it alone. Give it somewhere, then give nature and insects and amphibians like frogs and toads somewhere to go, somewhere they can be
Yeah.
quiet, and just leave them alone. And don't go in there with a strimmer, don't go in there with a mower. Anyway, so yes, there is this movement,
So
but
more balanced, and I like that approach, more balanced. One thing we're big on here now is not over cleaning up, especially too quickly in the spring. So leave some of the fallen branches and the foliage, so the beneficial insects and the toads
yeah.
have their natural habitat before we clean things up. I'm lucky we have acreage, so we have a lot of room for that.
Hmm.
So I can clean up some areas that are obviously customers are coming around. We can't have them slipping on a pile of debris or leaves, but we can move some of these piles to leave habitat somewhere else. So we're very conscious of doing that now.
Yeah, that is very much how I garden here and how I'm suggesting to the people that follow me as well. Just very, very softly, very lightly. There's a wave of chop and drop here now as well, which
Yep,
I'm
happening here too.
yeah, a little bit cautious with, only with because I grow a lot of herbaceous perennials. And much as I understand the concept of allowing it to stand until about now and then literally just chopping it into little pieces and allowing it to fall to the floor, it does mean,
Yeah,
unfortunately, you're actually self-setting an awful lot of plants, which increases a massive amount of the weeding. But again,
yeah,
it's one of those things. But I mean, the birds tend to eat a lot of the seeds over the winter, and I leave all of my herbaceous perennials standing for that exact reason. Watching the green finches and the chaffinches and the blue tits sort of work their way across the echinacea and the coreopsis and things, pulling out the seeds on a cold day, because we don't feed the birds here in the garden. And again, I come under a lot of criticism for people about that. Most important thing for me is they're provided with water. And if you have a natural garden like I do here, there's plenty for them to forage with rose hips and seeds and other bits and pieces. My neighbours feed the birds really heavily and they get frustrated that the birds aren't with them, they're with us. And it's like, well, again, they don't need they don't need peanuts and fat balls. They just need to be left alone. They need some space and some natural
And they
habitat.
need
So
habitat,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
I did a recording the other day and posted it. It was just listening to the birds up in the trees here, and we're so fortunate the 2 acres behind our area here has been untouched for 50 years.
Oh,
So there's
okay.
natural shrubberies and trees in there, but the habitat for the birds is incredible. I just love listening to them. It's a real chorus this time of the year.
Yeah, I must suspect the dawn chorus and the sunset chorus is really really gearing up here. We're lucky enough to have quite a lot of song thrushes, and they sit just outside the,
Wonderful.
the the porch door, and he'll sing and sing and sing for hours on end. Come sunset, so it's a lovely 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 sound.
Oh, that's great.
So in
Wonderful.
the garden, I had a good stalk of your Instagram account today, and it's not
Mhm.
it's not just roses you're particularly good with as well. You're a very good vegetable gardener as well, by the looks of things.
Well, I love all plants and I love to garden. And so the last few years, because I've made the time for it. Not that I've
Yeah.
had more time, I've made the time. I've gotten back into the vegetable garden, and I'm a pretty good gardener, I think, if I set my mind to
Well,
it.
it looks like you're an
And
extraordinary gardener.
well, thanks. I try hard and always learning. I've been gardening my whole life, and I'm always learning.
Yes,
So
I
I
think
love
that's
to
the
do the
key, isn't
veggie
it?
gardens.
Yeah.
I order my sweet pea seeds from Roger Parsons in England every year, and I do a huge fence, almost 100 feet long, of sweet peas. I'm all proud of those. But last year I went in, you probably saw the pictures of my leeks. I had never done
I'm
leeks
just going to say I've
before.
got leeks and onions in my notes in front of me, and they were
Oh, man.
huge.
Well, I think I had beginner's luck. They turned out just tremendous, and the onions turned out really well. And I did about 500 garlic, so they turned out well. But I'm very lucky. I have a close friend of mine, Mr. Claude Ledoux, who is an exceptional gardener. He's retired from one of our city parks here. He's huge into veggie gardens, and he's really encouraged me to develop it. And we donate some of the excess plants, and the produce goes to one of his groups that he's involved in. So nothing goes to waste, but it's just fun to grow a whole pile of leeks. It looks great in the garden if you have the room. The only thing is, I thought, what on earth am I going to do
I was
with
just going to
all of
say
these?
because you did have hundreds of them. What did you do with it?
Yeah, there's hundreds. You know what? After I finish talking with you, I'm making leek potato soup today and stuff from the garden, and leek soup next week and the week after, because I think there's still probably 100 of them out there. And big bins of my onions, I stored them all and give away to friends. And we have everybody cooks in my family, so everybody takes home bags of produce all the time.
So the
But we
next
all
the
love to
next
garden. My brother is involved in gardening. Both of my sisters like to do gardening. My brother's been the president of our local garden club for I think over a decade. So we're quite a gardening family.
very much in the blood with you guys then.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I can see a project on the horizon for you, Brad. It's 101 things to do with leeks and onions as a book,
Yeah, I think that would be great.
or a
Yeah,
food
yeah. If I
vlog
had the time
maybe.
to do that. Yeah, maybe a food blog. And people find it fascinating when we share the other pictures, not just rose pictures, whatever else is blooming. In the garden here, I plant everything from hostas to rhodos to, yeah, I love the tulips and daffodils. So we plant
Me
about
too. Yeah.
5,000 tulips every year and put on a marvelous display for people to see when they come out and see the garden. So you'll see a lot of pictures of tulips coming up over the next
Just
couple
going
of
to say
months.
that leads us really nicely into the fact that your nursery reopens its doors on the 25th of March. So that show of
That's right.
5,000 tulips and daffodils, I mean, assuming that's timed quite nicely, the nursery is looking great. You've got pots of tulips and displays everywhere, and everything looks really, really enticing and very much that spring has arrived.
Yes, it has. And
Yeah.
we love spring, just like you guys do there.
And when is it? I mean, obviously, you're gearing up towards reopening for the season on the 25th of March and welcoming your
Hmm.
customers back to the nursery. And how long will the season go on for you? When do you actually close the doors of the nursery again?
Until we run out of roses or tire
Okay,
out,
yeah.
which is usually middle of August, I find things are getting a little bit hot. People are finishing up with maybe some holidays and things like that.
Hmm.
We used to close as early as the earlier part of July, but people still want to keep planting here.
Yes.
So, and I have my wonderful team here that's helping out, taking care of the customers, and we will probably push through July, and then the first or second week of August will probably be the final date. The best selection is always early, so I always tell people the smart money is out early. So you want to come out and see us. If you want to see, if anybody is local and they want to see the peak of the tulips, is usually mid to later April, which is probably around the same time as you. That's
Exactly.
when
Yes.
they're at
Yeah.
the peak
Yeah. And we
blooming.
we
Yeah.
pray for very little rain and nice warm still days, so they have plenty of time to get
Oh,
themselves nice and tall and straight. And yeah.
yeah, and they look beautiful at that time. So, and we still have thousands and thousands of roses potted at that time. So there's a great selection then.
But I suppose you're dealing with two different types of customers. The die-hard fans that actually know exactly what they want to come and buy. As soon as you open your doors, they want to come and get
Yeah.
hold of that really good quality stock. And then you've got the other people that are more impulse purchase buyers and more a little bit need a little bit more inspiration that want to see them in flower in June and into July. That's the kind of different type of people, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a pre-order business too. So people will order the roses. So some of these people have booked roses. They're coming up. They're real keen. They pick up roses they've booked, and then they might also find something else that they're going to add. And there are other people that maybe they're just new to gardening, and they need to be inspired a little more. They need to see the plants, and those people start coming out quite heavily when the weather warms up to sort of middle of May to June time.
Hmm.
And depending on the season, I would say mid-June we start blooming here, as we don't well, we have the greenhouses, so a few roses are forced, but most of them are just outside in the natural setting, so they bloom, which is normal rose time, which is June usually.
Hmm. Okay. And just
And
very just
they'll be out then.
And just very briefly, you mentioned people that are new to getting into the subject. Obviously, this is something that I deal with on a very, very regular daily basis across my multimedia platforms. I'm advising people all the time on their
Hmm.
first entrance into, and it's normally a gateway plant that I say. That's the phrase I use. That normally it's a
Gateway
one
plant.
particular.
Oh, I
That's it.
love
Yeah,
that.
one particular plant will capture their attention, and all of a sudden it snowballs into a collection of X, Y, and Z, and there's dozens of something. Do you have any
Yeah.
top tips for for anybody listening that's beginning their journey into gardening, especially into rose gardening that's growing in Canada and in your growing zones? Do you have any top tips and sort of pro advice for people just starting out?
Oh, do you know? I absolutely do. I always tell people when you're starting out, remember that there is no perfect plant, there is no perfect rose. So
No.
don't look for perfection when you're buying the plant. This is a plant that's going to grow and live for many years, and it's going to have many different looks through the season. From a plant when it's dormant, and a dormant plant can be beautiful. Then it's going to leaf out, it's going to have flowers, and some of your flowers are going to be perfection and they're going to look like the photo. Others aren't going to look good and you're going to have to deadhead them. But it doesn't mean that you've done something wrong as the gardener. That's just part of gardening.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
That's good, solid advice there. I mean, I often tell people to I can't use the word, but just calm down because they get so het up, and
Yeah.
I get pictures sent to me as all that it's got rose disease. It's produced this flower that's all
Uh-huh.
deformed. It's
Yeah.
like no,
News
that's just
groups
the
have done that. Social media's done that
it's
to
just the
people.
hormone levels. Their hormone levels are surging forward. It's coming forward to the first flush. Deadhead, that one. Yes, unfortunately, it's unsightly, but in some ways, it's pretty. It's still a bloom. Deadhead, that
Yeah.
one, and
Sure.
allow it to the
Yeah.
hormones to keep raging forward in the first flush. And within a couple of blooms, it's worked itself out, and it's all beautiful. So that's really
The
good advice.
the most important thing in gardening is that what the 4-H motto was. I learned that growing up. Learn to do by doing. And gardening is a verb. It's something we do. So get out there and do it. And if you don't like how it's turned out, then just change your method and try something new.
Wonderful. That's
And
really wonderful to hear. Yeah. And again, I say to people that it's your garden, it's your rules. So I'm here to guide you
mm-mm,
through a way that is done traditionally. These are my techniques I learned through my degree and my 30 years doing this. And these are what works for me. But if it doesn't work for you, if you want to keep your permanent structures a little bit shorter, for instance, you grow hybrid teas, you want to take them down to 6 inches from the floor, you do that. If you, like me, are lazy and you don't want to bend down and you don't want to, sort of
mm-hmm.
do your back ins to actually enjoy the fragrance on your roses, leave your permanent frameworks up 18 inches, 24 inches, you do you.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
set, there's no
No,
set rules.
then no matter what you do to the rose, high prune or low prune, it wants to bloom.
Indeed.
It wants to bloom.
Wonderful.
That's a perfect place to leave that thought for the day. No matter what you do to the rose, it's true.
It is, yeah.
I learned that from an early gardener. He said, Brad, no matter what you do, you're worrying about the cut, you're worrying about this. And I was, pulling my hair out that I had at the time. He goes, no matter what you do, the rose knows its job. Its job is to bloom, and it will bloom.
Yes.
I was like, oh, actually, that's a good idea. Okay, now I don't feel so stressed out over it.
Wonderful. I've got one more question for you, for Brad, which is a
Mm-hmm.
standard question I'm asking every single guest that joins me on the podcast. If you had to leave the nursery and you could only take one rose with you, what rose would it be and why?
I would take rosemary Harkness, a Harkness rose, for a few different reasons. One, because it has the most beautiful, beautiful blending of colors of these tangerine orange with a little bit of honey, and there's a little pink towards the outside. And no other rose in the world that I've ever met smells like it. It's like crushed citrus fruit, and especially in the rain, it's even more pronounced.
Really?
I love everything about that rose. Yeah. If you go out on a rainy day and your roses will not smell, that rose will smell even more. I've noticed that many times about that. And I think that would have to be the rose. I also had the pleasure of meeting Peter Harkness, who was the father of Rosemary Harkness herself. And so it brings back memories of meeting him and his wife. So not even a rose that I've bred. It would be Rosemary Harkness that I would take. I'm bored with my own stuff, and I think anybody that develops anything, music or whatever, you're bored with your own work. You want somebody else's work.
Well, as long as other people get to enjoy it, I'm assuming that makes it all worthwhile.
Mm,
Brad, thank you so much
absolutely.
for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you and talking roses. I can tell that, like myself, you are a gardener through and through, and roses are very much your passion. So it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much, and hopefully I will talk to you again. Maybe we'll have a catch up, maybe on another season in the future. If you're happy to join me again, we'll have another chat.
Thanks, Ben. I'd love to join you again.
You take good care now. Thanks so much for your time. Bye bye now.
Bye now.
To say that I'm enjoying the conversations I'm having with some amazing gardeners across the world is a real understatement. Brad's passion for the subject really shines through, and I can't thank him enough for joining me on this episode of the podcast. I hope that you head across to Select Roses now and show the account some love. Whether you're in British Columbia or not, he shares some amazing hints and tips through his media accounts on a regular basis and is a wealth of rose knowledge. There are, of course, some amazing guests to come, and next week I'm travelling across the New Forest where I get to talk to Vicky from New Forest Hostas. This conversation was an absolute hoot, and I had an absolute ball talking to Vicky and getting to know why she loves hostas. She also shares some amazing hints and tips how we can keep this pesky slugs and snails at bay and protect the delicate foliage, certainly in the earlier part of the year as they start to emerge and grow new leaves, avoiding them looking like lace doilies for the rest of the year. So make sure that you tune in next week to listen to that particular conversation. Out in the garden, I'm off to plant my potatoes. I've been chitting them in the greenhouse for several weeks, and as usual, I'm going to be growing them in large containers, placing 1 or 2 potatoes into the very, very bottom of some large plastic buckets, where I'm just going to lightly cover them with some garden compost and allow them to produce sprouts. In the next 2 or 3 weeks, as their growth emerges and gets to around 15 centimetres high, I'll then earth them up again and continue this process until the buckets are completely full. I'll choose to keep them in the greenhouse until the worst of the weather has passed and the frosts have gone away. If you wanted to, of course you can grow them in the ground in a traditional way and earth them up regularly, but I often find that I can't be bothered to investigate the crop fully and miss an awful lot of the potatoes, which means they come up all over the vegetable and cutting garden for years and years after I've actually grown them in the ground. So I've started growing them in pots wherever possible. It just means that when it comes to actually harvesting them, all I need to do is take them to an empty piece of soil or a wheelbarrow and simply timp them out. And my crop is simply laid out for me to pick out, wash and enjoy. I hope that you have a wonderful week out in your garden and you've enjoyed today's episode. make sure you keep your ears peeled for next week's conversation with Vicky from New Forest Hostas. And until then, happy gardening.